Hey, Gabe.
Hey, what's up, Tim?
Remember when we were surprised while watching Top Gun Maverick in the theater that it actually had a nuclear weapons plot? And I started to, talk loudly in the theater that the uranium enrichment facility setup didn't make any sense. And then you said no talking in the danger zone and activated the ejector seat, and I flew out the theater?
Yes, I do.
Sorry about that. Next time we'll just text you during the movie.
I think you're being super critical.
Welcome to another episode of the Super Critical Podcast, where we delve into the fun and oftentimes nonsensical way pop culture portrays nuclear weapons. My name, Tim Westmyer, someone who studies nuclear weapons and works on nuclear nonproliferation for a living. And I'm joined today by the only person I would ever think to have on this particular episode, Gabe. Gabe, welcome to the podcast studio / Zoom / the Danger Zone.
It is a danger zone because I'm isolating from getting over some COVID, so it is literally the danger zone. People cannot come into my house, or else they will be infected.
Well, I will turn off my camera so that I even an extra layer of protection over Zoom, maybe? No, we'll see. I'll roll with it. Today, of all days, I wanted to make sure that you were here on the podcast because we're talking a little aviation activity here. What are we here to talk about?
Big day because we got Tom Cruise, we got fast jets, and we got a nuclear weapons plot in Top Gun Maverick, the sequel. How long has it been since the original? What was it, like 30?
30 some years. The last one was out in 1986, something like that.
There you go.
Tom Cruise and nuclear weapon plots inserted as random MacGuffins into action movies. Can you name a more iconic duo?
Than Goose and Maverick.
Maybe that one.
Tim and Gabe. Maybe they'll talk about Tim and Gabe. That way they'll have memes of us playing volleyball and stuff.
Well, between all of the Mission Impossible movies that have nuclear weapon plots that we've covered, I think Tom Cruise has found the perfect formula for box office success. We'll sure talk about Top Gun Maverick. We're recording this at the end of June, but the movie was released in May, so not that long ago, but it's still kicking butt in the theaters. This is a film that was delayed several years because of COVID restrictions on theaters, and Tom Cruise's insistence that this must be only released in the theaters, which I'll say thank you for that because it was a good choice.
Yeah, very good to see it in the theaters.
Gabe, we knew that this was a movie we weren't going to pass up.
Yes.
This is the movie about the skilled but brash Navy aviator Pete Maverick Mitchell, who went through the Top Gun school back in the original movie in 1986, saved the world from some kind of undetermined, unlabeled country fighting some MiGs, but everything was good. It's just 30 years later. He's still captain in the Navy, serving as a test pilot. Should have been promoted years ago. They said she should have been an admiral if he was going to be here this long.
Yeah, and like a senator or something, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't want to give up the open skies, right? He doesn't want a desk job. Fortunately for the podcast, he's pressed with an oddly urgent nuclear weapons plot that requires him to kick the tires and light the fires once again.
Classic movie trope. The old pro called back into action for one last mission. I've never seen that before.
Yep. I mean, I'm sure when I'm done with this podcast at some point, I'll have to do another one 30 years from now.
Yeah.
Because they'll remake Doctor Strangelove, and I'll be like, okay, I'll come back.
You're gonna be like doing some nuclear policy up on like a mountaintop, and it's gonna be remote, and I'm gonna have to climb up the stairs and like coax you out of retirement, and then you'll be like, "You son of a bee, I'm in."
Well, Predator handshake, I love it. Before we dive into the film here, Gabe, you want to describe our day of aviation enjoyment on that particular day?
We did a whole thing because obviously this is not an event that you take lightly. So, as has been mentioned before on the podcast, I'm a private pilot. And so Tim had a great idea that we would go up flying before seeing the movie, and we actually we got to fly. We fly here in the Washington D.C. area. Got to fly right by the Naval Academy, so we got that. We did some not really aerobatics, but we did the kind of most spicy things that my skills allow me to do in the airplane. Tim nodded off for a while, which I took as a testament to his right stuff. That I, even with some steep turns and steep spirals and chandelles. He wasn't flustered at all. So we knew he had the right stuff. So we were ready to go see the movie, and so we went to went to a theater and got right into it. So yeah, it was a fun day.
Yeah, it was either my, strong constitution or it was my lack of sleep due to toddler. One of the two
Right.
things. But either way, I stayed up for the whole movie, and I got to watch a movie directed by, Joseph Kosinski, who's did another film I really like called Tron Legacy, one of the best soundtracks of any film, and he also did another Tom Cruise movie called Oblivion. We'll go through the individual cast members as we kind of go through the quick plot description. Well, we got some Tom Cruise. That's kind of the main guy from the last movie. Val Kilmer, it does have a little bit of a cameo and a pretty good scene we'll talk about. But the main other stars, Miles Teller, Jennifer Connelly, and a John Hamm character who's
Don Draper was in it.
yeah, he loves playing the jerk. The jerk authority figure in movies. He's great at that. But as we said, this movie is doing well. 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Already made $1 billion worldwide as of late June. So it's doing okay. It doesn't need this podcast to talk about it. I haven't seen many people talking about the nuke plot online. People are talking about a few other things here and there about the movie. So let's let this be our niche of, wow, you included this in this movie. Very interesting. So let's get into it. 2 questions I have overall for this episode as we'll kind of get to the end. 1, what do we think about the inclusion of this specific nuclear weapons plot in the movie? Is it accurate? Is it necessary? And 2, more of a question for Gabe, what about the aviation stuff in the movie? Is it accurate? Is it awesome?
Yeah, we'll get into all of it and more, perhaps. We'll see.
All right, spoiler warning. We're going to run through the plot of this film. If you haven't seen it, go see it. We will kind of spoil pretty much most of it or you're off to do. And also, I'll firmly admit here, we didn't take notes during this movie. We didn't even know there was going to be a nuclear thing in it. It just kind of popped out of nowhere.
We were winging it, Tim.
Exactly. I have some notes here from memory and stuff. A lot of it might sound like it's from Wikipedia because someone was helpful in writing this down, but we're not going to run through the whole thing. You can read it online if you want to. We're just going to hit on the key points and then spend most of the time on the nuke stuff, which is kind of in the middle and the end of the movie.
Everyone here is the best there is. Who the hell are they going to get to teach us?
Captain Pete Maverick Mitchell. Let me be perfectly blunt. You are not my first choice. You are here at the request of Admiral Kazansky, a.k.a. Iceman. He seems to think that you have something left to offer the Navy. What that is, I can't imagine.
With all due respect, sir, I'm not a teacher. Just want to manage expectations.
What the hell? Good morning, aviators. This is your captain speaking.
And we're off.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
We're going into combat on a level no living pilot's ever seen. Not even him.
You think up there you're dead. Believe me.
My dad believed in you. I'm not gonna make the same mistake.
Someone's not coming back from this.
Having any fun yet?
But Gabe, why don't you get us started off? What is Tom Cruise up to, 30 years later after he graduated and was an instructor for a short amount of time at Top Gun? And also, what is Top Gun?
Well, okay, so Top Gun, for those uninitiated, it's a real thing. It's a school. It's a naval school for naval aviators for advanced training in terms of weapons and tactics and things like that. For those who haven't seen the original movie, I mean, not to spoil it, but obviously that original movie takes place with these young airmen who are, I think it was all men at that time, but who were training at Top Gun, and things happen. So Pete Maverick Mitchell, Tom Cruise's character, while a lot of the other people seem to have kind of gone on to do bigger and better things, I mean, he's still doing cool stuff. He's a test pilot for the Navy. That's kind of more of, somebody maybe 20 years younger would be doing. But anyway, he's out flying this really cool new hypersonic airplane called Dark Star, which was kind of weird. So it's shown as a Lockheed Martin aircraft. They also made a lot of people know the SR-71 Blackbird, that very famous sleek. There was some publicity around the movie.
The X-Men jet?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Very cool airplane. But there was some publicity before the movie that the crew tapped Lockheed Martin to design this airplane, and I don't know whether it was real or whether they were whether there actually is a real Dark Star thing under development or whether they just kind of lent some consulting for the movie, but it was pretty cool in any case.
I think it was basically they made a big model and said this could look like a supersonic thing and everything. I'm not sure if it's, maybe, who knows. We'll see if we see more UFO sightings, because that was one of the things people thought they were seeing when they saw this being tested out. I mean, hypersonic is funny because, anytime I hear the word hypersonic in my field, it's often referring to hypersonic intercontinental ballistic missiles. Missiles so fast that they can, be detected on radar, but then nothing you can do about it. They're too quick to shoot them down with artillery or ballistic missile defense.
Yeah.
Things like this. Russia has said that they have some. The United States is now getting into the game on hypersonic missiles.
And I think that was kind of the idea with this airplane. It's like a super fast spy plane. And so Maverick, he kind of almost steals the airplane because this Rear Admiral Chester Hammer Kane, played by Ed Harris for a cameo, he kind of goes to abort the takeoff, but Maverick's able to take off and get in the air and then pretend like his radios aren't working. As Kane orders him to come back, he keeps pushing the speed, and they're trying to get to Mach 10 times the speed of sound, and he's really pushing the airplane, and it's about to come apart. Finally gets to Mach 10 and everyone's cheering, but because it's Maverick, he can't just stop there. He needs to go even faster. He keeps pushing the speed, and all of a sudden the airplane fails in midair. It just breaks up because of the speed. And so there's this funny scene where he lands in the middle of the desert somewhere and walks into a bar. Cue funny comment from stunned onlookers.
Yeah, the little kid, after Tom Cruise asked, where am I? The little kid goes, Earth, because it looks like an alien.
Yep.
How fast do jets and other stuff get to these days? Probably not Mach 10, right?
No, nowhere near that. I mean, the Blackbird, and I admit I'm just Googling this now. Blackbird got up to just above Mach 3. To get up to the higher Mach, I don't know that they have these experimental kind of scramjet, ramjet aircraft where they're literally going so fast that you don't stand to compress the air anymore. The ram pressure of the airplane going so fast actually compresses the air, and it's almost kind of like a self-sustaining engine. Those can go pretty fast, but I don't think there's any human flown aircraft that gets anywhere near there. So that's purely, I don't know what the equivalent of nuclear nonsense is in the aviation side, but that was fictional at least.
Aviational annoyances, maybe we'll come up with something. So he crashes this plane. It seemed to me from as a lay observer, a pretty expensive airplane, and the thing that you would imagine, all right, man, you're done. But it sounds like he had a little guardian angel. He had someone looking over his shoulder, and it turns out it was Iceman from the first one, who's now he's an admiral. He has multiple times, sounds like in Tom Cruise's career, in Pete Mitchell's career, has pulled him out of bad, sticky situations, and including this one. He says, I need this guy, Pete Mitchell, I need Maverick to go do this secret mission. And he gets sent back to Top Gun. There's some kind of secret, thing that's needing to be involved here. And we get briefed on this. That's where we get introduced to John Hamm's character. So John Hamm, doesn't like Maverick, thinks he's a Maverick, decides that he would, if it was his choice, he wouldn't be part of this mission, but he's the Admiral says he needs to, so he's gonna. So this is where we get nuclear here. They decide that they need to have Tom Cruise come up with a plan and train some younger aviators. What we learn is there's some kind of illicit uranium enrichment facility buried underground in an unidentified country that is just about to become operational in violation of international treaty and other agreements that it has signed up for, and it's going to be fueled soon with unenriched uranium and will then be a nuclear weapons threat. This plant is located in a huge crater. So imagine, like a big crater in if you the kind of you would see in the moon, where you got your ups and downs. Or if you want to, in my world, envision a nuclear weapon test, where it was a subsidence crater or a detonation on the surface, and now there's a big hole in the ground. So they build this enrichment facility kind of at the bottom of this, and it's surrounded by SAMs, some surface-to-air missiles. It's in a country that has what they call fifth-generation aircraft, advancedly shoot down everything, stealth, fast, great missiles, can do all the things that the F-22 and the F-35 can do, and they don't think that they can use, for some reason, the F-35, one of the more advanced jets that the United States currently has. call it the F-22, the F-35, both fairly advanced. They have their issues in terms of deployment, but they can't use these because they say it is GPS jammed or it's a GPS denied environment. So they have to come up with another plan, which is to take F-18s, the Hornet. So if you remember the Blue Angels of jets, they need to take those, fly a mission through. Big picture, all of those times you've watched the other nuke movie that we've covered on the podcast, Star Wars, the Death Star trench run at the end of that movie, they essentially need to do that, pop out, jump up into the crater, stay below radar, fire missiles to first detonate a hole, then explode the ordnance underground. So 2 shots, fly up, get away from the SAMs, and get out of there before these 5th generation fighters can get them. That's the plan, sets up the nuke stuff, and the only one who can teach them this stuff is Maverick.
And I think, talking about it here, I mean, because we saw the movie, I know what you're talking about, but if you were explaining it, I think listeners can get a little lost, but in the movie, I thought they did a great job of showing exactly this, profile of what they needed to do, this kind of high speed, low altitude thing, and they had to do these very specific parts of the course, and they did a good job of, hammering it into the audience's brain, so you kind of felt like you were along with them and you knew exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't like the end of Star Wars where they do a quick run through of the plan and then they actually have to go do the plan, but it's 3 minutes later. This, they show first it digitally, then they train about it, right? The whole middle of the movie is them training for this mission, and then when they finally go and do it, one of the things I loved about it was they don't take time to be okay, now you're going into this area, don't forget about this thing. They just assume the audience knows at this point because we've seen it. I loved that aspect to the movie. It made it.
Yeah, it was almost like the audience was at Top Gun along with them, training. It was cool.
So this is kind of where this happens all right at the beginning of the movie, and it was one of those things. I was literally laying back in the chair, those reclining chairs you get at the fancy theaters, and I have to see this nuke thing pop up, and I raise my chair up, and I just turn over to Gabe, and Gabe's like, "Uh-oh."
We just looked at each other. We knew there was going to be a podcast coming.
I found this really fascinating because instantly the first things I thought were, I kind of know a little bit of what they're drawing from. Yeah, they're drawing from Star Wars and they're drawing from, from the original Top Gun and the idea of needing to train people to do a mission kind of stuff. But it parallels 2 real aircraft attacks against targets that were nuclear. And if you would allow me to disrupt the plot here real quick with a quick run through of what this is, because this is really, I think, the heart of what I wanted to cover. There were 2 missions. Both of them were largely launched by Israel. First one was called Operation Opera. It was a surprise attack by the Israeli Air Force in June 1981 on an unfinished Iraqi nuclear research reactor north of Baghdad. This reactor is a combination of the names, some in French, some in Iraqi, called Osirak. Israel basically said, all right, this is a month away from being started up and being fueled. They needed to go in and destroy it because they thought intelligence reports that they had this particular research reactor, not a nuclear power plant, but a research reactor, would be able to produce plutonium that could be used in a future bomb project by Iraq. So they said, no way, this is not happening. They came up with a doctrine of essentially if they feel being threatened, they were going to do a preemptive strike. They went out and did it. This actually followed a failed mission a year before by Iran, and kind of hard to believe today, but this was a mission kind of secretly planned jointly between Israel and Iran to a large capacity because both of them did not like Iraq. Neither one of them wanted them to have a nuclear weapons program. Essentially what happened with this mission was, they were going to go after this target. This was not interesting enough, this was not a secret nuclear enrichment facility or a power plant or even a secret nuclear research reactor buried in a mountain or in a crater somewhere. This is something that the French announced that they were going to purchase. The Iraq went out and said, first they said they want to buy a nuclear power plant. No one would sell them one. So the French said, no, we'll build you a nuclear research reactor. We know that this design is largely going to be for civilian purposes. It was going to be under what they call safeguards. So that means that the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, would have various kinds of instruments and other mechanisms to do material accounting, meaning no amount of material that would be sensitive enough to build a bomb project type stuff would be able to leave. The French said, yeah, we'll put highly enriched uranium to the level that you need, not weapons grade, but we'll bring some in because that's what you need for this reactor, but we'll take it back out when you need new fuel, when you need refilling. So they decided to build this thing. Iraq had a nuclear medicine program since the 60s and had wanted to buy some sort of power plant since the 70s. So they bought this one from France. France, basically built it. They supplied 12.5 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, which is not nearly enough to build a bomb project. Also, it's not at the right grade that you would need to build a bomb. France thought it was safe. A lot of the world thought it was safe. Israel did not. So Israel sent F-16s and F-15s to bomb the reactor. Reports indicate that about 10 Iraqis were killed. One French citizen was killed. Israel paid restitution to that family in France. Iraq later on in the 2010s asked for restitution for the destroyed reactor, and they did not receive it. But this was a surgical strike, much like we see in the movie. They couldn't do refueling because they were violating Jordanian and Saudi airspace without permission, and kind of like we'll hear about in the movie, they wanted to do the attack soon before the facility was fueled, have any sort of like radioactive contamination, although that was debatable because this was very far away from Baghdad. It's not clear in Top Gun, I don't know about you, Gabe, how close this crater is to like any city or civilization. It was near an air base and the ocean, but it didn't seem to be near like a city. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems pretty remote. I mean, it almost looks like it's up in the Himalayas or something. I think they actually filmed it in the Cascades in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, it almost has a feel.
It was filmed. I think it was filmed near Lake Tahoe.
Oh,
California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind then. So yeah, I guess California mountains then. But no, it feels almost like Himalayas almost because it's just very steep kind of peaks. But then, like you say, it's close to the ocean, so unclear where this could be.
Either way, back to the real world situation, this mission, the actual bombing lasted about 2 minutes. Yeah, there were defenses around, but they were largely jammed by Israeli jamming technology. And a lot of the pilots weren't ready for they weren't up in the air. There was one story that some of the people who were manning some of the SAM sites, the SAM sites, had gone out for lunch. They turned their radar off. So the Israeli jets came in, they came out, they got detected, but they had already left. But by the time Iraq was up and going. Question was, a lot of people ask is, was this a successful mission? Because, the movie, we'll talk about kind of how that goes at the end, but, people debate about whether this was needed or successful. From one perspective, yes, it was successful. It destroyed the facility, but a lot of other non-proliferation experts say that this largely what happened was it drove the Iraqi nuclear weapons program, if there was one, for the, long time, that drove it underground and made it harder to detect because they essentially decided, okay, fine, we can't go this route. We're going to do it secret. Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq at the time, became much more interested in actually having a weapons program because he thought if he had one, he could deter these kinds of strikes from Israel. Iraq and France never rebuilt the facility. France eventually left the project in 1984, and during the first Persian Gulf War, the United States finished the job and destroyed the rest of the reactor. Saddam was not so happy, ordered the execution of the region's air defense zone colonel, imprisoned about 2 dozen of other pilots and officers. And, there's a lot of debate in the non-pro community about whether or not this reactor could have even made plutonium. A lot of people essentially say, no, it was under safeguards. The French knew this was a problem, so they designed everything so that this could not happen. Richard Wilson, who was a Harvard analyst and who actually inspected the damaged facility back in the 80s, said that it would have taken decades, if ever, to make enough plutonium in sufficient quantities, and quote, the Iraqis couldn't have been developing a nuclear bomb at Osirak. I challenge any scientist in the world to show me how they could have done so. Fascinating stuff. It kind of, but this is definitely a big part of Israel's, military history, and something that a lot of people look at and wonder whether or not there is now kind of this tacit understanding that if you have a nuclear weapons program or you suspect it to, someone's going to bomb it and it's going to be okay. The public did not like it. Even in the international press, the Israel was criticized by the United Nations, by the General Assembly, which contrasts to the other example when this happened. So in 2007, in Syria, there was another suspected nuclear facility. Never really understood what it was, but the design from the air seemed to resemble a facility that North Korea had. The designs were close. So Israel went in, and like the movie, bombed through this operation called Operation Outside the Box, destroyed the facility. Very quick joint operation. It was actually one that was jointly done with the United States. The IAEA in 2009 found some traces of uranium and graphite, but they didn't until 2011 when they were able to go in when the United States and others kind of held that part for a while during the civil war in Syria. They actually fairly are confident that it was some sort of undeclared nuclear site. This was another F-15, F-16 joint strike, but kind of different than, but interesting contrast to the Top Gun movie, which we'll talk about here in a second. Instead of having one of the F-18's pilots, their weapons specialists, paint the target with a laser, the Israelis actually sent in a day or two before some commandos to go next to the site and paint it with the laser handheld one, which allowed the smart bombs to be able to destroy those targets. And if anyone's ever seen that really terrible movie with Pauly Shore called In the Army Now, essentially the same plot for that at the end of that movie. One reason why I bring up this other example is there was almost no international condemnation of this strike. Probably a lot of it because Israel never acknowledged it until 2018, and they finally said, yeah, no problem, yeah, this actually happened. But essentially, the IAEA wasn't allowed to come in. Syria was busy covering up the site, and no one really talked about it. So people wonder whether or not this means that between these two strikes, this is the precedent for any sort of future activities. And it also often gets brought up in the context of maybe some undeclared facilities in Iran. Do we go in and bomb it? Israel and the United States got away with this previously. Maybe this is okay to do again. And clearly, the military leadership in Top Gun thought it was perfectly fine to do. So what did they do, Gabe, to get ready for this mission?
Maverick goes to this bar where they've kind of the bar from the original movie. Where
back at Top Gun.
Yeah.
Interesting thing, real quickly. In the 90s, Top Gun, the facility, left California and is in Nevada now.
Really?
The movie doesn't acknowledge that because they like the location and the scenes and all of that. So they're just like, no, it didn't move. It's still in beautiful outside of San Diego. So they're like, no, it's the same place. So don't worry about that. Right. We didn't actually. I actually
didn't. I did not realize that. I thought, okay, interesting. We're in this bar, and there's this whole crew of the new aviators who are going to take part in the mission. And so these are, and I think this is the way Top Gun actually works. I'm not 100% sure, but it's not like cadets who come like fresh out of training or something like that. It's aviators who have been doing it for a while and have been picked, to get special training. They get that training and return to their unit. Yeah, in this case, they've kind of picked some of the hottest pilots from around the Navy and Marines, I guess. There's this funny scene where they see Maverick at the bar and start goading him into buying them beers. Hey, buy me a beer, old man. And then the next day, there's one of the airmen in particular. There's a young guy named Hangman who's kind of like the hot shot. He then shows up in class the next day and realizes that he was kind of picking on Maverick. So there's a few other people there. There's also very, very significantly Lieutenant Bradley Rooster Bradshaw, who is the son of Maverick's late best friend, Nick Goose Bradshaw. So for anyone who saw the original and remembers Maverick and Goose, it's his son. And there's definitely going to be some drama there, we sense.
And it's fascinating because you wonder, okay, well, Rooster seems to be not happy with Maverick. Like, Maverick clearly was upset that Goose died in the first movie, in the kind of scene where maybe it was his fault, maybe it wasn't his fault, but it seemed like an accident, I think, to the viewership, but people debated it. He clearly was distraught by it. It's one of those things where is Rooster upset because his dad died at Maverick's hands? And it doesn't really seem that's the case. It seems like he's upset because when he applied for to go to Annapolis, a little bit of influence that Maverick had, he kind of held back his application for a couple of years, which denied a bunch of service. And it turns out that a couple years of service from what Rooster could have done, and Rooster was upset by this. It turns out that I guess Rooster's mom, Goose's wife, said no, like don't let him follow in the footsteps of Goose. But Maverick never let Rooster know because he didn't want Rooster to be upset at his mom who had passed away. So there's clearly a tension there. Top Gun, the place where when there's tension, it's gonna pop out because people are already in pretty tense flying situations, and it makes for a lot of good drama.
Yeah, no, exactly. And actually, I think he kind of confesses this. Maverick kind of confesses this as he reunites with his former girlfriend, Penny Benjamin, who she was back at the bar scene and they kind of hit it off again, and it's kind of like, oh, well, I'm not going to let this happen again. I'm not going to let you break my heart again kind of thing. But yeah, you can kind of guess where that goes.
So I didn't remember this because it's been forever since I saw the original, but apparently in the beginning of the original movie, there's some quick reference after he does that flyby and gets yelled at and gets sent to Top Gun that he says something like, oh, you've been cavorting with some admiral's daughter. And I guess Goose turns to him and says, Penny Benjamin? And he goes, shh. So then they bring her back, She wasn't in the first movie, but she was referenced.
Okay.
But it's not the main female lead from the first movie, Charlie. Yeah, no discussion about what happened to Charlie, other than just maybe, Pete Maverick is a Maverick and doesn't settle down for anything. Doesn't like to put his feet on the ground.
So he's they get into the training, and it becomes pretty clear from right away that these aviators, even though they're like the best of the best, that Maverick is just like so much better than them. There's all these like montages of them going in the air, doing some simulated dogfights, and Maverick just kind of smokes them all. And he's having some trouble getting them to work as a team. There's a lot of big personalities, especially this Hangman guy.
And they call him that because he's if you're his wingman, he's gonna leave you hanging out to dry.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because just a note on all the. I mean, I'm not big into military aviation. I'm more into commercial. But these nicknames, they don't come from something cool that you did. They come from something silly that you did. So if you tripped over a log or something at a campground, you'd be like, you're wood stick or something like that, or clumsy or something like that. It's not like they're not like cool, Iceman and Maverick and all that. They're a lot more silly than that, actually. But
well, they do have a character in the movie whose call sign is Bob, and his name is Bob. I thought I enjoyed that one, so that one made sense.
Yeah, that's pretty. That was good. But yeah, so they're really having trouble. And actually, this is where we get the cameo from Iceman, who he's like in his house. He has throat cancer. He can barely talk, and they're kind of communicating by typing back and forth. And Maverick's kind of like, I'm not the right guy for this job. I'm not ready to do this. They need something different. Iceman's like,
it's like you gotta let it go. Gotta go figure it out.
Exactly. He sends him back, and this is all, by the way, on the backdrop that the requirements for this mission keep getting made harder and harder. Like John Hamm will come in and be like, we now only have 2 weeks to train. We don't have 3 weeks anymore, and they need to like complete this ground run in less time. So Maverick's feeling the pressure, and he breaks it with this. It's a callback to the volleyball scene from the original. They play football on the beach. And it's a little less cringy, but it's kind of fun.
It's great.
It's like a team building thing, and like John Hamm like comes to the beach like, what do you think you're doing, blah blah blah. So what happens then is shortly after that, Iceman dies because he had cancer. And with this, they very quickly take Maverick off of this training mission because he no longer has the protection of Iceman or the boosting of Iceman, and so he gets taken off, and they decide to continue the training without him.
Yeah, it's very clear that Tom Cruise, Maverick's goal is to do the mission under parameters that allow all the aviators to return home. One, he cares about all of them, but two, he can't lose Rooster. So he wants the mission to be done fast and get out and complete the mission, but have everybody come home. There is a competing parameter set that's a little bit looser that I think John Hamm's character is pushing, which is, look, we need to get it done, and if some people don't return, that's the price of business to get this mission completed. And that's why when they're complaining about, well, no, you're going to do it, but you're not going to do it as quickly, which leaves them open for attack, but it gets the mission done, less likely for them to crash into the wall or something like that. But I love this. Like the first beginning of the movie where Tom Cruise, Maverick kind of steals the new fast scramjet. He just out of nowhere appears on radar, has taken an F-18, and it's his job now. He's now running the mission. I don't know why he didn't do this earlier, to show everybody that it can be done, but he does it now. And this is one of my favorite scenes. There's the music is very quiet. You just basically hear him grunting at the G-forces, and he completes the mission. He does it faster than they ever had thought it could be done, and gets everything completed, which I think inspires the rest of of the team to get it done. And then he picks his team leaders. I think it's like, it's definitely, you got some Rooster, you got some of the other kind of main folk that are there, but not Hangman. Hangman is left because he never was able to finally like click with the rest of his crew. So he's left as like alternate, and they all get on some planes, right, and head over. There's other plots that we didn't get into. He rekindles his love with Jennifer Connelly. He kind of promises to maybe settle down if he survives the mission, all of that kind of stuff. But he now promises Goose, talk to me, Goose. I'll promise that I'll get Rooster home.
So they do they go to fly, the mission now with Maverick kind of leading it. As we talked about in the beginning, they just go to fly the course. It's exactly what you've seen them training for over and over. But now you get to see it with actual. They were doing a simulated course. Now you can see it with like real mountainsides and
there's some surprises. Like there's snow.
Yeah, there's snow. There's a bridge that pops out of nowhere that they didn't know about, so they're kind of having to adapt to that. And I thought this was very well done, and I guess it was all filmed in the actual airplanes, because you really see the effect of the G. I mean, it's a very physically intense sequence, and from what I understand, kind of watching stuff on YouTube after this, reading about it, is that this is very much what flying one of these airplanes is like. Is just a grueling, physically demanding, exhausting kind of experience, just because of all the G-force your body's taking, concentration, everything. So you really get that sense, during this. And so there's two teams. So the first team that's going to hit the site first is led by Maverick. The second team is led by Rooster. And Tim, if I recall, like Rooster's kind of falling behind. He's not like he's not flying as well as he could be that day.
Yeah,
right?
he doesn't, live. He doesn't live in the danger zone. He gets, he's danger zone adjacent for most of the movie. He doesn't fly as fast, or doesn't make as quick decisions. He overthinks it. They make a joke about how he overthinks everything, and Pete Mitchell says, "Stop thinking, just fly." So he's slowing down. He's not as fast as he should be, and he wasn't as fast as he was during all the training missions. And also, as they leave, the other important thing is there's a massive Tomahawk missile strike from one of the destroyers that's kind of with them, and that destroys the airfield that's near the enrichment facility, which would destroy, they said, most of the 5th generation fighters and the Air Force that's there. Destroys the runway more or less. What they need to worry about is if there are any planes already in the air.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's just it's a very coordinated. I think it gives you the sense this is like a coordinated action, and that's why they need everybody to be performing properly. And Rooster, when he's flying behind, Maverick says that thing like, don't think just fine. He just like firewalls the throttle. He starts like going too fast. I think his backseat guy is like, "Oh, slow down! This is too much." And it very much reminded me of like Star Wars, like use the Force, like don't think, it was like, but anyway, so they actually do complete the mission. They hit the target. The first team hits the target, then the second team, I think the targeting software or something breaks in the airplane, and he actually does it manually. Again, a Star Wars. There's a lot in common. The more I think about it with that Star Wars, where it's just like closes his eyes and presses it.
Another nuke movie. I've covered that on the podcast. I will argue that as a nuke movie.
There you go. But now the issue is getting home, right? And this is where so they've destroyed the nuclear site, so Tim can be happy. But now what happens, Tim?
Well, like they said, now the surface-to-air missiles are firing, because they have lit up everybody there. So they are able to evade a bunch of them with flares and evasive maneuvers. But it's very clear that Rooster is about to, be destroyed, I think, by one of these missiles. So kind of out of nowhere. And again, this is just Tom Cruise. For some reason, they have it set up so it's the lead F-18 is just the pilot, and the backup one who was coming in to first Tom Cruise was going to open a hole on the enrichment site, which is underground, and then the second one with Rooster was going to paint it with a laser and actually like fire the missile that goes underground, instead of doing like an actual one missile that penetrates into the ground. So Tom Cruise is by himself in the F-18, and he masterfully calculates the trajectory that this missile is about to hit Rooster, makes a maneuver so that his jet is clipped, and Rooster survives. Tom Cruise goes down, and now Tom Cruise is like kind of like behind enemy lines, being chased by a helicopter. What does Pete Maverick do when he no longer has, he's no longer piloting
on
the
his
plane.
airplane. Yeah.
You know, he's basically he's a pro in two places, right? He's pro, you know, behind the in a cockpit and on the sand. You know, in a volleyball court. This is neither of those things. He's in a snowy area. This is his natural terrain. So he's stuck. And what was going to happen? We don't know. And he's about to get shot by this. I don't know why the unidentified enemy doesn't try to like capture him and find out what's going on. No, they want to kill him with his helicopter. Fortunately, for Maverick, Goose comes out of nowhere, destroys the helicopter. Then he crashes, and Maverick like punches him and says, "Dude, I saved you. Why did you do that? I saved you. You weren't thinking." And then what does Rooster say right back to him? You know, you told me not to think.
Yeah, he's like, don't, he says, don't think. So that's what he was doing. And then I think that the whole theater got a good laugh after that line.
Here's the best part of the movie. They mentioned multiple times in the movie that this Air Force is a combination of the most advanced jets ever, these 5th generation jets, and a bunch of like holdover stuff from the Cold War, like F-14s. You know, Tomcats, the plane from the first movie. And what does Tom Cruise and Miles Teller do? They go to the base and steal an F-14, take off on a short runway, and fly away. They get chased in a really excellent, awesome scene where they get chased by these 5th generation fighters. They're able to destroy some of them by like through some subterfuge, because it's not clear that why would there be like Americans up there, right? It's F-14s. They thought it would be the enemy thought it was them, their side, and it's a fun chase scene that they almost get destroyed. You think it's gonna go bad, but then Hangman comes out of nowhere, saves the day, doesn't leave them out to dry. Maybe his call sign is gonna be changed to Deus Machina or something instead of Hangman. But he comes in, saves the day. They're able to land. You know, most of the plane is destroyed, including like what their landing gear, but they land. Everything's fine. Rooster and Maverick kind of reunite. They rebuild a P-51 Mustang. Can you tell me a little bit about this little small plane? So I guess they repair this thing. This is Maverick's last mission, and then he goes up with Jennifer Connelly, and they fly around just for a joyride.
Yeah, I mean, P-51 Mustang, that was kind of like probably going to get flamed by people who know more, but like the F-14 of World War II. It was like the best known, one of the best known, like, U.S. air fighters. So I think did some other bombing stuff and everything like that. So very classic. You know it if you see. If you've been to an air show, you've seen a P-51 Mustang. And actually very cool. Tom Cruise took James Corden up, the late night host. And
oh, that's right, because Tom Cruise can fly now.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but he takes James Corden up in a P-51 for some aerobatics. You should definitely we'll put that in the show notes. It's definitely a cool video. So yeah, he can fly this thing in real life, which is kind of cool. But I mean, just on the ending, I mean, I think we've kind of probably butchered it here because it's something you have to go see.
Yeah, it's all action stuff. It's awesome.
I think I really recommend that people go see it, because I think the way it was done was just very careful. It was you don't have to know anything about dogfighting or flying or anything like that. It is done so well. I think I've read certain things that it obviously was dramatized quite a bit. I mean, especially with the F-14 theft and the fact that the F-14, they're able to take down one of these Su-57s, which is the Russian, 5th generation fighter. Basically what I read is there's no way that would happen. The onboard radar and attack capabilities of the Su-57, they would basically shoot down the F-14 before they even got close.
Which is what the F-14 could do back, during the Cold War. There was what I remember from when I was into aviation, thought I would be literally, if you could imagine, there was a world where I, as a young child, was a fan of the F-14 and then saw Top Gun. It was an amazing thing. Like, it's just like basically, you can imagine that sequencing for things. But there was a missile called the Phoenix missile that could be fired and forgotten, which was a huge deal kind of back when that was there, because it meant that the pilots were never within missile or gun range of any other plane, which would allow the F-14 as an interceptor for aircraft carriers to really be very safe. When it was dealt with any sort of incoming strikes against those carriers. So kind of fun to be inverted here, but then still, like they say in the movie, it doesn't matter how good the plane is. What matters is the pilot.
And this is another theme. I mean, we probably should have mentioned this in the beginning, but this is another kind of theme of the movie is we're on the advent of having aircraft that can fly either with a pilot on the ground or without a pilot at all. And so the question is, will pilots even be relevant? Is are aviators, are human aviators a dying breed kind of thing? And this gets woven into the story a little bit. And I think this dogfight, this end scene, the movie puts forth its position that a skilled pilot, even with great equipment, you put a skilled pilot in the cockpit and they can definitely definitely be a difference maker. So whether it comes to be true or not, who knows? We'll have to try to stay alive a little bit longer and see. But yeah,
well, that's the movie. Really strong recommendation to actually see it, because it's not worth us giving you the play-by-play, but it's just as exciting as the first time you saw the trench run in Star Wars, just with Tom Cruise, which is the one thing that Star Wars was missing. So let's get super critical. I got a few other kind of additional nuke things here and there that I thought were interesting, but I don't want to go too much into it, because it's a lot of it's nitpicking that's not necessary at all, for this movie. Because my first thought was oh wow, no diplomatic solutions or international coalitions being built up for this strike against this particular country that's clearly violating an international treaty. Nah, that's not necessary, because then the movie doesn't happen, right? Of course there was this thing called the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA as it's called, that the Obama administration negotiated to actually solve this exact problem. Have an enrichment site that was set for civilian purposes, and to make it so that there wasn't you would never have a situation, or at least it would be years before you would get to it, where enough uranium was enriched to the point where you can maybe potentially build enough of it for a bomb project. This was canceled by the Trump administration. They're struggling right now to renegotiate a new version of the deal, but there was no effort for that. It was basically whatever this country is, they don't want to negotiate it, we're going and bombing it. The other thing, this is the thing that I think is really interesting though, and important, that is maybe a little interesting to you, Gabe, I'm not sure if anyone else would be fascinated by it, but you don't build these kinds of facilities in places like a giant crater, because there are things that you need for the actual facility to work. You need electricity and power sources that you have to run to the facilities. And while some of that stuff you can maybe build on site with diesel, or as the United States did it for some of its enrichment facilities, some damming hydroelectric projects and stuff, it's hard to do that, to run these kind of lines in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a giant crater. There's no sense of water supplies or sewer for these facilities. There's no roads for staff and supplies to get there. And I think that's really the fascinating thing. This sounds like nitpicking, but one of the ways that the United States and the intelligence community and open source investigators that weren't even involved, with the intelligence agencies detected some undeclared facilities in Iran was by looking at bus schedules. And there was this one bus that no one knew where it went to, but it was in this one city nearby, and they figured out that this bus was taking people to the enrichment facility. People have to work here. They're not all just scientists in lab coats. There's people who, are janitors, and people who are running the cafeteria. Those individuals work at these sites. But how do they get there when it's in the middle of nowhere and in a giant crater? Either you build a city like you did in the Manhattan Project, or you have roads that are from nearby cities.
Yeah, this totally went over my head. It was funny. I bought the I bought this whole little thing, hook, line, and sinker.
It's fine because it sets up a cool scenario, but to me it takes Top Gun from more realistic settings to a little bit like a Bond villain territory.
Yeah, no, it definitely had that feel, and
it's fine. It's awesome, but it's not where these things are at.
Yeah, no, understood.
It's very hard to hide an enrichment facility. They're large. They have a lot of things that you can detect via satellite, like heat sources, because it involves a lot of power. If it's a centrifuge, and what an enrichment facility does is when you mine uranium in the ground, the isotope, the very particular isotope that you would use in a nuclear bomb project or in a nuclear energy project, that particular isotope of uranium it's not the most common one. It's less than 1%. So when you take the rock from the ground, you have to then separate it from other rocks. You then have just your uranium powder when you mill it. You then want to separate out the stuff that you don't want from the stuff that you do. The way they do that is they turn it into a gas. They spin it. The heavier elements go to the outside. The thinner elements are on the inside. They just keep doing that over and over and over again. And eventually you get a higher concentration of the stuff that you want and a lower concentration of the stuff that you don't want. To do that takes cascades, hundreds, thousands, depending on how advanced these centrifuges are, for this to work. Most of the time, these are people require lots of space, lots of power, and that generates a lot of heat. That's how we often are able to detect these things, and it's very hard to hide in an enrichment facility. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but it's probably easier to detect honestly out in the middle of nowhere like they did in the movie, which is kind of why would you put it there? I guess the sense is we're going to just put it in the middle of nowhere and then put 1,000 SAM sites all around it. But then the funny thing to me that doesn't make any sense is, like in Star Wars, they have this one canyon that can get there. No one will be able to do it, so why would we figure it out? But like, well, why don't you just put like one or two like down there, like in the canyon, and have that be able to detect them? It doesn't matter. Or most likely what you should have done was run literally some wires across the canyon so jets can't fly through it.
Yeah, I didn't even think about
right?
that.
Whatever.
Well,
because then the movie can happen.
This gets to the other question. I mean, and I think we're getting into the, we're in the parking lot now, or I think we just hung out on
we
the
actually
sidewalk,
did, yeah.
in the sidewalk in front. But yeah, like why send in jets to do this? And I know there was this whole thing about, the GPS jamming, can't send, more advanced stuff, need to send the F-18, which why not just send a big missile in? Why not send a bomber strike from like way up high? I mean, I again, it's to make the movie happen, but like, wouldn't that have made more sense?
I think the sense there is, well, it's underground, so you're going to have to really hit it exact. I'm not sure why they didn't have jamming operations like the Israelis did against their targets. Why didn't you send in Tomahawk missiles to take out the SAM sites? Why weren't there cyber operations that were done like against Iran? If you Google the Stuxnet virus, a lot of stuff that Israel and likely the United States did to disrupt some Iranian enrichment facilities, to put those programs back a little bit. I mean, I think most of the answers is sort of the movie could happen, and also the fact that it makes, I think we joked about this, is, well, F-18s are something that the movie could get. It's not going to get an F-35, and they didn't want to do it in digital, like CGI. You can get an F-18. If you want an F-18, Gabe, I can get you an F-18. Just give me enough time.
Exactly. I don't actually doubt you on that, Tim. I'm sure I've learned to not be mistrustful of you. But no, the other thing too, I think there's no two-seater. They wanted an airplane that had tandem seating. So I think the way they actually filmed it was they had these F-18s. They had a real naval aviator in the front doing the flying, and they had the actor in the back. And so again, you have that line of dialogue to make that work.
I mean, look, I think what they would probably do with this mission these days would probably be some kind of missile combination, or at least they would try with the missiles first and then follow up with the jets. But, I'm not a military planner. Maybe there was a lot going on that they couldn't do it. Maybe missiles that would be detected and they would be shot down by the SAMs, I guess. I'm not sure. But it makes the movie, excellent to have it the way that they do. One other thing I was going to ask you about is, like the first Top Gun, they don't name the country. They have no sense of who is building this enrichment facility. And I want to know from you, does that help the movie, hurt the movie in your eyes? I think they do it for lots of reasons so that they don't get pigeonholed into politics or get any sort of diplomatic snafu or anything like that. But do you think it helps to have the country named or not named? What do you think about that? Or a fake country like, Gabistan?
I think for a movie like this, I think it was good because I think it doesn't distract from the key focus, which are the aviators and their story. And also I think just down the line, I mean, how many movies do you watch where it just doesn't really hold up because they're talking about, we're going to go fly Czechoslovakia, stuff like that. So I kind of like, and Top Gun does have that kind of timeless appeal to it, the original. So I kind of like it that they'll set it up. I don't know if you felt the same or if you would have liked to see like Russia or China or something named. As
a nuke person, I'm glad they didn't name it because that would have been the first thing in my mind is like, oh, don't say that. Because the first thing I would have said was, oh, you think it's Iran? Like, Iran's not. That's not what they're up to. So I think I'm actually glad they didn't. But some people have tried to do a little bit of sleuthing and like I do with some of my writings on nuke stuff, like to play around with what evidence is in the film. And I think some people have said that, it's Iran, and because Iran is currently a member of the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Non-Proliferation Treaty, so they would actually be violating if this was a non-declared site. They have had some enrichment facilities, some that may or may not be declared. They also have previously purchased aircraft from Russia, and Russia is trying sometimes to sell these advanced fighters, these fifth-generation fighters that you had mentioned, the Su-57. Iran has not yet purchased these things, but, there's debate about whether or not they might. Iran, most importantly, actually does have a very large collection of older aircraft, a lot of it holdovers from when the U.S. and Iran were allies, including the F-14. The Iranian Air Force is actually the largest owner currently of owner of F-14s in their Air Force. Debatable about how many of them are operational. Fascinating.
That's actually that's very interesting. I because when I saw the F-14, I was like, oh no way, some other country got
Oh
its
yeah,
hands on.
Iran
Yeah,
has a bunch of them.
that's fascinating. The thing I thought also was very interesting, I was expecting this was like very popular 5 to 10 years ago, the kind of China fan service
Hmm.
where to appeal to audiences in China, there'd be some like ridiculous plot line where like China like comes out of nowhere and lends support.
The
I didn't
first
see
they'd
it.
be like the first pilot from China from another country to join Top Gun.
Yeah, exactly. And I was actually kind of surprised to not see it in this movie. I guess it's like a reflection of the times a little bit, where we're cooling on China a little bit.
It's clearly they don't name it. It's just kind of
Yeah.
fascinating. I don't think it's Iran. I don't want it to be Iran because that sets up a whole bunch of like
And you don't
dumb
want
analysts.
you don't want this podcast to basically create an international incident. So we'll just
Yeah, we're not that. Other people have also said the first movie was North Korea,
Okay.
based on some of the fighter jets and some other stuff that's there. But again, they never say it. But I will say this though, my very first ever video game for the original PlayStation was Top Gun because I loved aviation. I love Top Gun, so I bought the Top Gun game. It was crazy expensive for me when I got it when I was that young, but it had like full motion video of the guy from the movie, but also he plays Principal Strickland from Back to the Future. He's basically yelling at you in this like choppy full motion video, and in that game they clearly name it. I remember it as Burma or Myanmar, but Wikipedia tells me it's Cuba, Libya, and North Korea.
Oh wow.
They
Okay.
very clearly name it. So the only Top Gun thing that I am aware of where they just straight up name it is the video game. So that's kind of why I always thought it was.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So let's wrap up here with our rating system. We always like to rate the content out of 1 out of 5, with 1 being awful, 5 being terrific. I like to tailor the rating system since we get super critical about the movie content. Might as well put that same level of intensity into the reading. All right, I got my briefing from John Hamm. We've talked about the mission parameters here. The scale will be 1 out of 5 get out of jail free cards given to you by your buddy Val Kilmer. If you have just one of those get out of jail free cards, you're going to think twice about doing any sort of flyby by any sort of tower. But if you've got 5 of those bad boys, whew, that tower crew better have sippy cups on their coffee, otherwise that thing's getting spilled.
Yeah.
How many get out of jail free cards given to you by your good buddy Val Kilmer would you give this film?
I almost am giving it a 5. I'm gonna give it 4. Can I do like a half a get out? Maybe you get like a day out of jail. With
One of
that
those is
half
like
card.
a bail bond.
Yeah. I do 4.5. I think. I mean, for me it was nearly perfect in terms of a summer blockbuster. Yeah, some things we could nitpick a little bit. No, I thought it was just very well done, and you should just go see it. I mean, the flying sequences, again, if you know nothing about flying, it's so much better than we've kind of clumsily made it sound like here on the podcast. But also just the cast, the acting. Yeah, maybe they could have done a little of the interpersonal stuff a little bit better. Some corny moments, but I thought it was great. What about you?
4. To me, that's a good rating. 4, not a 4.5 or a 5. Movie that I highly recommend. Anything over a 3, I would be like, yeah, check it out. 4 is really good. 5 is, there aren't many 5s on the podcast. Great action movie. Top Gun is often talked about as being like a recruiting tool for the U.S. Navy, and I'm sure this is going to continue that trend. But, I think for people interested in my field of nuclear nonproliferation as a career, please don't think that this is the only way you can address these kind of challenges, is to send Tom Cruise in to blow it up. So I joke about that, but it is a very terrific action movie, and the kind of one I might want to see maybe at an IMAX. Maybe we'll go see it again. I don't usually go see movies twice in the theater because it's hard enough to go to the movie to see it once with the toddler. Maybe when you're out of quarantine, Gabe, we can go see it again.
Yeah, I'd be down for that. I know my wife would still wants to go see it, so yeah, maybe we do a little outing.
Gabe, anything you want to recommend to people for further watching, reading related to Top Gun, or just something you think would be cool in the genre or about aviation? Since we usually like to do that at the end of our podcast.
So I found this very interesting discussion on this thing called the Jocko podcast. I guess he's like a former Navy SEAL. He does a podcast with a former real life Top Gun instructor named Dave Burke. And then they talk about the accuracy of the movie and what Top Gun is really like. I thought it was really cool because it kind of opened my eyes to things that I thought were fake and done for purposes of the story actually were pretty accurate. So yeah, check that out. There's also the YouTube clip, as I mentioned, of Tom Cruise flying with James Corden and scaring the absolute what out of him. And then finally, Lockheed Martin has like a whole page dedicated to their work on the movie and Dark Star. And again, I'm not sure whether they're actually designing this or not, or whether there's something in the works similar to this, but it's kind of cool. And there's some videos on there, and you can download a wallpaper. So yeah, we'll put that up there.
Excellent, we'll do. My current CEO for my company is the former CEO of Lockheed, so I have to ask him how he felt about the movie. So I have 4 things to recommend. First is a post. It's going to get increasingly cooler and less nerdy. Or maybe how you depend your definition. The first thing is a post by the always excellent National Security Archive, which is located at George Washington University. It's a service that provides a lot of like declassification efforts to find previously classified information about different international events, and puts them together in a wonderful narrative package to give you some insights about various events. And they had a really great one about the Israeli operation against Iraq in 1981, what they knew, what they didn't know in the United States, what France did to make it harder for the reactor to be used for a nuclear weapons program, and then what Iraq did to take the strike lesson that it had to make a weapons program and had to do it underground. So I'll link to that. There's also really good footage online that was declassified out of Israel about the actual strike. You can see from the perspective of the pilot the entire bombing operation, so you can compare that to what we see in the movie Top Gun. There's a great book by Ambassador Wendy Sherman called Not for the Faint of Heart, Lessons in Courage, Power, and Persistence, that came out in 2018 about a lot of stuff, but about negotiating the Iran nuclear deal that I mentioned previously. So if you want a different perspective on how to deal with nuclear issues, you can read that book. It's a terrific one. Finally, I recommend a movie that I entirely forgot about, but I'm so glad I remembered. Hot Shots! From 1991. Have you ever seen this one, Gabe?
I have not. It may have been on TBS or something when I was young.
Yeah, this is exactly those kind of movies from 1991. It doesn't hold up well today because it is not a movie that would get made well today. There are a lot of really terrible stereotypes in that film. It pokes fun a lot at Iraq because, Gulf War, the enemy at the time, you're allowed to punch down or up or whatever you can do with those parodies. But essentially, it's a parody of Top Gun. Like I said, starring Charlie Sheen and Cary Ewells, I never can say his name right, and Valeria Golino, and the always funny Lloyd Bridges. And I'm not kidding. The main part of the movie is people at Top Gun being trained for a mission that involves destroying an Iraqi nuclear power plant. So
oddly prescient. Yeah.
It's an odd timeline that we live in, that the parody of Top Gun plot becomes the plot of the 30-year later Top Gun movie. I love it, and I'm so happy that I got to talk about that. Gabe, thank you, as always, for coming on the podcast. If people want to find you and see what you're up to, probably go in the DC area and look up, right? Maybe hanging out somewhere near the Chesapeake Bay. Look up.
If it's slow and doesn't look terribly exciting, it's probably me. So the opposite of Top Gun.
And if you squint while you're doing a very gentle bank, you might see me nodding off.
There you go.
Very peacefully enjoying everything that is about aviation. I was awake for about half of it. I just really was so peaceful.
I take a lot of people flying, and they're kind of like, when people get quiet when I'm flying with them, it's because they're probably not having a great time or not. They're not entirely thrilled with the experience. So I'm always kind of worried, but you were there just like sleeping like a baby. That was nice.
Although you did task me with looking out for other planes. So sorry about that.
No, you're good. But no, it was a pleasure flying with you as always, watching the movie with you and doing the podcast. So no, really nice. Really good to do this one. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Supercritical Podcast. If you want to have any suggestions for us on future episodes or want to tell us what we got wrong, either nuke-wise or, ways that I can maybe stay up when I'm supposed to make sure that planes aren't traveling in our direction, there are a couple ways you can do that. You can reach out to me, Tim, over Twitter at Nuclear Podcast. We also have a website, supercriticalpodcast.com, where we post. I'm a little behind, but I usually will post show notes and other information about our different episodes, kind of the research that goes into each one. And you can reach out to me over email. I promise I will get back to everybody that's reached out to me. I read all of them. I'm just, again, because of the toddler, very slow to respond to any email that doesn't involve work stuff. supercriticalpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, this has been Tim Westmyer.
And Gabe.
And remember, if it's pop culture and radioactive, we are bound to get super critical about it. Have a good one. especially if that thing you need is speed.